Today's project is how to stencil a cushion cover. First of all, make sure that it has been laundered and pressed, and then fold it into four. That will find the center point for you. Okay, with any square or rectangular piece of fabric, this is an easy way of finding the center. Now, there's a cross, a crease mark, where the center should be. Then, to stop the fabric from sliding around, I've cut a piece of scrap paper, and I'm going to spray the back of that paper with some spray repositioning adhesive. You only need a light amount, but it wants to be an even mist all over the paper. I'm going to move it slightly away now from the project. Now, insert that into the cushion cover. I do hope I've cut it the right size. There we go. Doesn't matter if it's smaller, but you don't want it to be too much smaller because the fabric needs to be held wherever you want to stencil. Okay, that's all smoothed out. Now, if I was doing a repeating pattern, it would be imperative that I could still see that crease mark, which I can. But this stencil actually, by luck, fits the cushion cover that I'm about to do. So I want a small amount of spray repositioning adhesive on the back of the stencil. Okay, no more than that. I do a little test. Press my hand on the sticky surface, and if it doesn't start to fall away after a few seconds, you've got too much spray repositioning adhesive. And if that was the case, you just tap it down onto either your overall or a paper towel, something like that. Okay. Put the stencil into position. And you see how the adhesive just holds it in place for you, yet you can hear that slight resistance. It's not enough to stick it, it's just going to hold it. Then you want the main colour of your stencil project. I'm going to use a gold. Having said that, I've put out every colour apart from the gold. Well, I'm going to grab some gold paint right now, and I'm going to put an underlayer on of gold, and then just little whispers of the other colours on the top of it. Here we go. A little squirt of gold paint. Now, because the gold is going to be my main colour, I'm using the largest stencil brush. You only take the slightest amount of paint, okay? Doesn't matter if it's unevenly distributed across the brush, because the next thing you're going to do is to stir that round onto paper towel. That evenly distributes the paint. Take a tiny little bit more, work it round, then just make sure that it's dry. The paint you put through the holes in the stencil needs to be damp, not wet. And can you see that at the moment I'm just tickling the surface of the fabric. There is very, very little pressure here. And you keep going until you don't believe that you're making an imprint anymore. Now normally when I'm doing fabric I would recommend you don't lift up your stencil and have a look, but I just want to show you here the colours that we've got so far, and you can see that's a lovely crisp and clean outline. At this point I'm going to say that I'm going to use a different brush for each of the colours that I intend to use, and I've picked smaller brushes for details and larger brushes for bigger areas. The fabric that I'm using for this cushion cover is silk, linen, cotton. Any natural fibre is excellent for a project such as this. You need to be able to heat set the paint at the end of the project. So although silk won't take a particularly hot iron, it won't take a hot wash either. So your decorative paintwork is pretty safe. And don't use fabric conditioner or softener in the wash before you stencil it. I know it's terribly boring watching paint dry, but what I'm doing at the moment is putting the underlayer of gold onto just about everything there, and then I will be setting other colours over the top of it. Can you see how the brush stays upright all the time? If you let the brush slide at an angle, you'll push the bristles of the brush underneath the bridges of the stencil. The bridges are the parts of the design that hold the whole pattern together. I do hope that's all the gold layer filled in by now. Right, shouldn't really lift the stencil when it's on fabric because it is so hard to get it back into position because it stretches the fibres of the fabric sometimes. So make sure you lie it back exactly where it should be. If you make a mistake on fabric, you can't wipe it off easily like you could do if it was a wall or furniture. So very often we have to look at the mistake and think, okay, how can I make this into something nice? So if you've put the wrong colour, maybe you've put brown where it should have been blue, that's okay. You blend in the brown as subtly as you can, and then you make the same mistake several times over. So more or less everywhere you see a bit of blue, why not add a little touch of brown to it, so that by the time you've made this mistake several times over, it is no longer a mistake. It becomes a feature of the cushion cover that you're doing. So yeah, don't worry. You just have to think, how can I turn this mistake to my advantage and make it look good? I usually start my stencil projects with one of the lighter or possibly weaker colours. So if I then make a mistake, it gets covered by the next colour that I'm applying, which is going to be slightly darker. So that each time you are putting on your new colour, it can then hide any mistakes that you've put earlier. But it does mean that your last colour, your dark one, that's got to be a good layer. You've got to concentrate on that one. because you're not going to be able to cover it with something else. I'm not encouraging you to be slapdash with your stenciling efforts, but I do want you to know that it's really not the end of the world if you make a mistake. There's nearly always something you can do about it. One of the worst things you can do, and I'm harping right back to what I said at the beginning of this project, is using too much paint. If your paint is splatting and leaking underneath the stencil, yeah, there's not a lot you can do about that. So really all I can say is just don't do it. Paper towel, hardly any paint, hardly any effort, and you will get lovely crisp edges to your stenciling. You'll get some beautiful blends of colour. It's a mistake to think that if you load up the colour you will get the job done quickly. You won't. That's when you make mistakes, that's when the paint leaks, and you spend far more time trying to fix what you've done. Well, we're just about at the end of this project. I know I've been fiddling on and adding paint here, there and everywhere. It's quite easy to get lost in stenciling. I think possibly knowing when to stop is a good idea. I am just applying a last little random stipples of gold over the cushion cover. Now the techniques that I've shown you will be exactly the same if you want to customize denim jackets or jeans, skirts, shirts, pillowcases, all sorts of things. It can give a new lease of life to fabrics all around your house. As I move the fabric, you can see the shimmer of the metallic paint. But I will add some photographs so that you can see it an awful lot better. All we need to do now is to remove the paper and iron the fabric. Iron on the reverse of the painted side. Thank you for staying with me till the end of this. The stencil can be found in the Ottoman selection of borders at the Stencil Library, and this was the first video that I've ever tried to make myself, so thanks very much. I promise I will learn and improve. And I hope your stenciling will improve by watching them. Thank you. This was Helen Morris at the Stencil Library.